It's the 2022 World Cup. It's Cameroon's players. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin and today we'll be looking at Cameroon's squad for the 2022 World Cup. Those following on YouTube, we'll run a very simple graphic where we list the names and you can see the spelling of the names as we go through them. And this is the same broadcast for the podcast. So for the podcast listeners, we're going to try to repeat the names a few times to help listeners familiarize themselves and, knows who's who when they step on the field during the World Cup. So the way we do this is we go through the players and share some of the data we've collected in our files. And using that data, we try to predict how likely the player is to make the team. So we categorize them into definite, likely, possible but unlikely, and seems to be off the squad. And we also have a couple of other categories for retired or injured players, usually just big players who have retired there. So we'll also try to determine which players will be starters and which will be substitutes. And that's as much as we can do at this point, but we'll see when the rosters are being published how things actually turned out and how wrong we actually were in our predictions. So in November, probably, we're going to do an update podcast. That will essentially, as I said, be going over our predictions, updating them based on the games they play between now and then, and revealing which players were selected, probably for a preliminary squad and a final squad. That's usually what teams put out. We'll also be updating the team podcast, which is available through our webcast, through our website, and we'll give information on our website at the end of the podcast here. So keep your eye out for those podcasts, the team podcast, which we've done group by group, and the update podcast, which are probably coming in November. Meanwhile, just both before and after we go through the players here, we'll make some comments on how the team looks going into the Cup. So let's begin. We actually did a podcast for this in January for the 2021 January Cup, which confusingly was in January 2022. So I'll probably refer to that as the recent Cup just to avoid the 2021-22 thing. And yes, Connor and I did a podcast on that, so I'll mention a couple of takeaways and we'll come back and review them at the end to see if they still hold. So we noticed a lot of turnover from their title win in 2017. That was for the 2021 World Cup, of course, but not many of the players survived from that 2017 title-winning squad, which took us by surprise, and still fewer survived from before 2017, where it's less surprising because they were actually fairly weak in the few years leading up to that surprise title win in the 2017 African Cup. So we noticed that they're probably building towards a stronger team here because a lot of the players didn't have that many caps. More than half of their starting lineup, though, was fairly experienced, though, again, most of them didn't go back past 2017. So, sorry, I was meant to put up a little thing on the YouTube thing that said recent turnover. So that's what I've just talked about. A lot of turnover recently. Another thing we noticed is that there are a lot of defensive midfielders and central midfielders, but not a lot of left and right midfielders or left and right wingers. So we thought that it's probably the central midfielders who will fill that role, or possibly attacking midfielders or forwards filling the role of the more attacking left wingers and right wingers. So we guessed some players are playing out of position. So heavy in the center is one thing we noticed. And as a result of being heavy in the center, we expected Cameroon to go with a 4-3-3 formation with a lot of forwards and central players. So let's move on now to look at their formations to see if we were right about that. And lo and behold, it turns out we were completely wrong. Actually, they did have a 4-3-3 formation in their excuse me, in their qualifying games leading up to the 2022 to the 2021 African Cup. For the last two games, they went with a 4-3-3, and for their game against Ivory Coast, they went with a 4-2-3-1. So both of those formations kind of favored central players. But as it turns out, they generally, well, I'll say they've settled on a 4-4-2 basically, especially in their recent matches. All three of their recent matches, which is actually the two playoff games that qualified them for this World Cup against Algeria, and then an African Cup 2023 qualifying game in Burundi. All of them 4-4-2 formations. And in the African Cup itself, they were kind of all over the place. They went with a 4-1-4-1 or a 4-4-2 for the first 5 games. And then for the 6th and 7th game, changed that up to a 3-4-3 and a 4-2-3-1. So they didn't seem to settle. Didn't seem to settle on a formation there, but now seem to be settled on a 4-4-2. So, which is a surprise, actually, because, as we said, they have a lot of central players, and the 4-man midfield especially would require wide players. We expected 4 in defense, but the 4-man midfield surprised us because that would use 2 kind of wide wingers. Anyway, that's the way their formation looks. And we'll start by going through the squad now. So manager, I'll actually start with the outgoing manager, Tony Canseco. Tony Canseco was their manager in the 2021 African Cup. And they hosted that cup and ended up losing to Egypt in the semi-final and winning the 3rd place match. So I don't think that's necessarily a terrible result. Maybe a bit disappointing as host. And on the source I use, it says he was dismissed at the end of February, but I'm inclined to think that just his 3-year contract was up, because he was with the national team from 2019 to 2022. So whether he was kind of fired in anger or not, I'm more inclined to think that just his contract ran out, and they just decided to go with, instead, Rigobert Song. So the famous player for Cameroon, captain of the team in the past. He actually, as a player, played from 1993 all the way through 2010. So 137 caps for the national team and 5 goals. He was a defender, and he was part of the 1994 World Cup and the successful 2002 World Cup team. 1994, 1998, and 2002. Sorry, I'm getting a bit lost. I think 1994 was a successful year where they reached the quarterfinals. he was part of four World Cup appearances. So he appeared in 4 World Cups, which is quite impressive. 1994, 98, 2002, and 2010. I don't think they passed the group stage in any of those cups. It was 1990 where they reached the quarterfinals, so just before his time. He also played in numerous African Cups, and he was captain of the team. Had 137 caps in a career spanning 1993 to 2010. Just 5 goals as he was a defender. Now he is the manager of the team. He's been involved with the national team for quite a while. He's been a caretaker manager before, being part of the manager of the team that plays in local cups just inside Africa, and also part of the under-23 national team. So he was part of the system since about 2016, the administrative system, and now they have named him manager since 2022. So Rigobert Song, we will call him a definite because it would be mad to change their manager at this point. Excuse me. Okay, on to goalkeepers, and we're going to talk. I'll just introduce the names here as an overview, and we're going to talk about Andre Onana as a definite candidate, and Davis Ipasi as a likely candidate, Simon Omasola as a likely candidate, Jean Ifala, possible but unlikely, so we probably won't talk too much about him. Fabrice Ondoa as seems to be off the team, and Carlos Camina I will actually start with as a retired player. So Carlos Camina is the outgoing keeper in that sense, and he's actually been off the team since 2019. So last appeared on the bench in the 2019 African Cup, and he was actually just on the bench in that cup, had already lost his starting roles, and actually hadn't participated in a tournament since 2010. So actually well outgoing. So we won't talk about him anymore because he's kind of a name of the past. But of course, they had to replace him over the years. And it was eventually Andre Onana who took up the starting role. So Andre Onana has started all 3 of their games since the recent African Cup. And so that's why we have him as a definite here. He was also the starter in the African Cup 2021. It actually looked like he wasn't going to be. He was under a doping ban for a year before the African Cup, so there was some question as to whether he would play in it. In our previous podcast, though, we thought he would resume his starting position, and so he did. So he has been with the national team since 2016, has 20 caps, which is actually not that many, and is 25 years old. 26 now. He plays for Inter Milan in Italy and played for Ajax in Netherlands before that. And his first tournament was, he didn't take part in the 2017 African Cup. Actually, he refused the call-up for that for some reason, but he didn't refuse the 2017 Confederations Cup, although he was just on the bench there. So he became a starter for the 2019 African Cup and the 2021 African Cup here. Andre Onana, the player we consider their definite starter. And even more likely, because the 2 goalkeepers behind him are quite inexperienced, Davis Ipasi and Simon Omasola. So although we consider them likely candidates, they're quite inexperienced. So Davis Ipasi, of course, played none of the games since the African Cup because Onana did, but he was on the bench for all 3. So he's been with the team since 2021 and has 5 caps. He's not that young. He's 29 years old, but fairly new to the squad, as we saw. He plays for Abha in Saudi Arabia, and he played for OFI Crete, Lamia and Levadia in Greece before that. But he was born in France, and his first teams were French. Okay, so his first tournament was in 2021, where he was on the bench. The same is true of Simon Omolosa. In fact, he too was on the bench for all three of the matches since the recent African Cup, and a similar history to Apasi. He's been on the team a bit longer, though, since 2019, and he has 3 caps and is 24 years old, so younger than Apasi. And he's interestingly is with AS Vita in Congo DR. That, I believe, is Congo DR's biggest club. And he was with Cotton Sport in Cameroon, one of their bigger clubs, before that. Again, the 2019 African Cup was his first tournament. Okay, behind him, we won't go into too much detail on these players, but if they end up coming back into the picture more, we will do that in our update podcast. But Jean Ifala last played for the team in the 2021 African Cup. He was actually the 4th goalie brought along. He was on the roster, but saw no action. And he's been with the team since 2012, but only has 2 caps. The other one is a bit more well-known, Fabrice Ondoa, and he last appeared for the national team on the bench in June 2021. Now, I'm not really sure why he's out of the picture, because he's only 27 years old. But his career is basically from 2014 to 21 with 45 caps. So he was the one who basically replaced Carlos Camina. He was a starter in the 2015 and 2017 African Cups and the 2017 Confederation Cup. But by 2019, he was the backup keeper behind Onan, and then not selected for 2021. He played the first of their 10 games in 2021 and was on the bench for one time after that. So just seemed to kind of drift off the team. I believe he was a consideration if Onana, no, I may be mixing that up with something else. Anyway, off the team it seems, but young enough to make a comeback. So in review, we have the goalkeepers. And we're going to say Andre Onana will be the starter there. And Davis Apasi and Simon Omosola as the backup keepers. And actually, I'm not sure, like they allowed 28 players to come to the African Cup. And the Cups in 2021, they also expanded the number of players that could be brought. So that's why most teams brought 4 goalkeepers. Just in case they came down with COVID or something like that. But I'm not sure what the rule is going to be for the upcoming Cup. So we'll stick with the normal 3 goalkeepers. If they do allow one more, it would be Jean Ifanga or maybe recalling Fabrice Ondoa. Okay, let's move on to the defense, and we'll begin with central defenders. We actually have a category for general or versatile defenders, but there are none of those. So central defenders. So we'll start by talking about a player on or kind of on the out there, Yaya Banana. I'll explain a bit later why I'm starting with him. But we begin with the definite candidates in Michael Ngaju Ngajwe as a definite, and a bit surprisingly, Jean-Charles Castelletto as a definite, and we'll talk why that's a surprise soon. As possible candidates, it's Harold Mukudi, Jerome Ongwen, and Christopher Wu. So typically they bring, I would say, 5 central defenders. to a tournament. So those might be the 5 names right there. On the seems to be off the squad category, we have Frank Bagnac, Jean-Claude Billon, and well, I'm going to say retired is Joel Matip. We'll talk about him at the end. Okay, so let's go back to the top and talk about Yaya Banana. So they basically had a gap in their central defense. Michael Ngajwe was there since 2017, which we'll get to. But the other position was kind of in, they didn't really have a candidate. So in 2019, it was filled by Yaya Banana, who started and finished all 4 games, except for game 2, actually. But basically, he was the starter. And I won't say much more about him because he went as quickly as he came. So obviously, they weren't satisfied with him as the steady central defender. So he kind of is out of the picture, and he last appeared in that 2019 African Cup. And so we're left with Ngajwe with no real partner going into the 2019 African Cup. And so in our previous podcast, okay, let me introduce Ngajwe first, and then we'll talk about who took the role. So he is a definite candidate for us. He actually scored 2 of their 4 goals in qualifying, and he started all 3 of their games since the recent Cup. And he was their starter in 2017, 2019, and 2021. So really has the role nailed down. He's been with the team since 2016 and now has 53 caps and 4 goals, so 2 of those coming recently. And he is 32 years old, so they're going to need another one in the years to come fairly soon. He plays for Ghent in Belgium and with Slavia Prague in Czech Republic before that. He's been in Romania and in Germany, and of course, started his career in Cameroon. Okay, so Michael Ngajwe there. And it looked, as I said, when we were doing the podcast before the recent African Cup, we actually had Jean-Claude Billon and Harold Mukudi as the likely candidates, and Jerome Ongwen was the possible candidate, and possible but unlikely was Jean-Charles Castelletto. But as it turned out, he came in and became the central defender there. So he actually didn't start game 1, but by the end of the tournament, he was games 2, 4, and 5. I'm just going to see who started game 1 there as the central defender, and it was Ongwen was the starter, and Castelletto kind of worked his way into the position, but it seemed even like they were kind of undecided up until the end, because Ongwen and Mukudu each took part as central defenders too for a game or 2. But Castelletto nailed down the position and has started all 3 games since. So now Castelletto has been with Cameroon since 2017, quite a while actually, but never made it really into the squad until 2021. So he only has 11 caps, and he's younger than Ngajwe at 26. So if he holds down the role, he'll have a few years there. He was born in France and has played with French teams all along, except he played for a team in Belgium on loan. Oh no, he played for Club Bruges in Belgium too, but now he's with Nantes in France. And as I said, the 2021 African Cup was his first tournament. So for that reason, we consider him likely, because he has seemed to take the role for himself. Okay, let's take a look at a couple of those players who were considerations The first one, Harold Mukudu, we think he's possible. And looking at how many central defenders they have, I would actually say likely to make the cup, but he'll probably be a backup player as he was in 2021. He has played none of their 3 games since the recent World Cup and was on the bench for only 2 of them. So even though we thought he might fill the role as a starter, he didn't do that. He has been with the team since 2019 and has 11 caps. And he's also quite young at 25 years old. And he's with AEK Athens in Greece. But he has spent time with Saint Etienne in France, and he was on loan to Middlesbrough in England. He was born in France. And yes, he did start the first game of the African Cup 2021. And no, he didn't. Who was it? Oh, it was on. Yeah, no, he did start games 3 and 7 of the African Cup in 2021. So it looks like they kind of gave him a try and ultimately didn't decide on him. There. Okay, so the next one is Jerome Ongwene, and he was the one who they started in game 1 as the central defender alongside Ngaju Ngajwe. But he only lasted the first game, and then he lost that starting position. And actually, the last time he appeared for the squad is in 2021. So maybe I'll do it on the thing now and move Harold Makudi up to likely. But Ongwen is definitely just a possibility, having lost his starting position in the Cup and not playing since. So just quickly, he's been with the team since 2018 and has 10 caps. He's 25 years old and he plays for Eintracht Frankfurt in Germany. He just moved there from Red Bull Salzburg in Austria, where he was there for 4 years. Okay, and the other candidate who seems to be coming in and is quite possible to make the Cup, given their lack of central defenders here, is Christopher Wu. So he just came in the last of those 3 games in June. That was the game for the 2023 African Cup qualifying, and he just was on the bench there, so he didn't play. But I was thinking they need to find a central defender, maybe a couple more. So it looks like he's kind of being brought in as a new candidate. He was born in France and he plays for Lens in France, and he has 1 cap, so I'm kind of not sure where that cap is coming from, but I won't dwell on it. He has 1 cap and has since 2022, so somewhere in there he got a cap. Maybe it was in that last game against Burundi. Oh no, he was subbed into that last game against Burundi. So again, maybe kind of trying him out in that position. Okay, and then the other players are Frank Bagnac. So he last appeared for the national team in March 2021. So he seems quite well out of the picture. Never really made it onto the team. He made it to the 2015 African Cup, but was on the bench and otherwise didn't make any other tournament, even though he was been with the team since 2015. The other one is Jean-Claude Billon, who actually we considered a likely candidate for the African Cup, but he was not. He had played 3 of their 8 games in the lead up to the Cup after his first cap, but he hasn't appeared for the national team since November 2021. So he may come back in because they seem to need a couple of more players, 1 at least. Especially if Ongwen is not there. The last player I'll mention is Joel Matip. So he is, of course, a well-known player. He plays for Liverpool in the English Premier League and has done so since 2016. But he last appeared for the national team a long time ago in September 2015. And in 2017, he was named to the preliminary squad, but he refused the call-up and apparently has been refusing ever since. He was part of the team in the 2010 and 2014 World Cups, but again, hasn't played since there. So a big name for them, that they're not able to use, Joel Matip. All right, well, let's go through the central defenders again. And right now it looks like Michael Ngaju is a definite, and John Castelletto has made the position his own as a starter. I've moved Harold Makudi up to a likely candidate because they don't seem to have a lot. And so he'll kind of be a backup there. And then, as I said, they usually bring at least 5 central defenders. So Ongwen and Christopher Wu still in the picture there, and possibly belong. And I'm sure they've tried to talk Joel Matip back into the team, but we have to consider him kind of off. Okay, let's move on to left backs, and I'll introduce the players. We have Nuhu Tolo, who seems a definite candidate, and Ambroise Oyongo as a likely candidate. And we have Enzo Ibose as a possible candidate. And we have Fabrice Nga, who seems to be off the squad, and Joseph Nguem, who seems to be off the squad too. So 5 candidates for left back. They usually bring 2. And yes, okay, Nuhu Tolo seems to hold down the position now. He started all 3 of their recent games there, and he also started all 7 games of the African Cup, except for Game 7, which actually they fielded a B team. Maybe that's why the 2 central defenders were different in Game 7 there against Burkina Faso. And for Nuhu Tolo, that was his first tournament, even though he's been with the team since 2017. He has 15 caps and is 25 years old. But he wasn't in the cap in 2017, and then was absent for the next 3.5 years. So he kind of came suddenly into the picture in the lead up to the African Cup. I'm just checking here. Yeah, he played their last 4 games in the lead up to the African Cup, and there he was as the starter. So he plays for Seattle Sounders in the USA, and after leaving Cameroon in 2015, has been in the USA ever since. Okay, so Nuhu Tolo, the definite candidate. The likely candidate is Ambroise Oyongo. So he started one of their 3 games since the 2021 African Cup and was on the bench for the other 2. I guess he didn't start as left back there because Nuhu Tolo was in that position the whole 3 times. But Nuhu Tolo was in that position twice, and he was in it once. He was a substitute in the 2021 African Cup in 2022, but he only started Game 7 there, and that was all. He subbed into one other game. He has been with the team since 2013, so one of the few players who is actually a real veteran on the squad here. He has 51 caps and 2 goals, and he's 31 years old. And he's unattached right now. He was with Montpellier in France from 2018 to 2022, and he also played in Canada from 2015 to 2017 with the Montreal Impact. So I was kind of happy as a Canadian that he was selected for the 2017 and 2019 African Cups. He was actually, his first tournament was 2015, and he was a starter in all of those tournaments. But in 2021, Nuhu Tolo kind of took over the starting position. So we see that maybe he is kind of still vying to be the starter, but Tolo seems to have the edge on him right now. All right, moving on, we have a possible candidate in Enzo Ibose. So he actually didn't play any of the 3 games, or didn't start. Actually was not selected for any of the 3 games since the African Cup, but he was brought to the African Cup and was a sub on the bench even for Game 7, the B team game. So he still has no caps for the national team, but that's okay. He's 23 years old and still has a lot of time. And judging by club affiliation, he could make a challenge because he's with a fairly good club, Udinese in Italy, and he was with French clubs before that, Angers and Le Mans. So maybe kind of an up-and-coming candidate, and maybe he'll make a mark in this cup. The other 2 players who we mentioned, Fabrice Nga and Joseph Nguem, we consider them possible but unlikely in the last go through the players, and they haven't played since then. So Nga last appeared in March 2021, and so did Nguem actually too. Nguem did make it to the African Cup 2017 and the Confederations Cup 2017, but was on the bench for both of those and hasn't made inroads since. So again, we'll give more details on them if they end up being on the preliminary or especially the final roster. So to review, left back Tolo and Nuhu Tolo seems to hold down the position. Ambrose Oyongo seems a likely candidate to make it to the cup, but would be the backup, although there is a bit of a push to resume his starting position because he owned it in the past. And again, I said they bring 2, but they obviously bought 3 to the African Cup there. So Enzo and Bosse, a possibility. Moving on to right backs, this is even more nailed down by Collins Fay, who we have as a definite, and we have Olivier Mbezo as a possible candidate, and we have Sacha Bui as a possible but unlikely candidate, and we have Joyxim Dawa as a player who seems to be off the squad. However, we did have Joyxim Dawa as a likely candidate in 2021 in our previous podcast, but he seems to have fallen off the team. But let's begin with Collins Fay. He started all 3 of their games since the recent African Cup, and he started all 7 games except the B team game in Game 7. He started all games in African Cup 2021. So he's been with the team since 2012, which would make him seem to be one of the few veterans, kind of pre-17 veterans on the team, but he's not, as you'll see soon. So with the team since 2012, 49 caps and 30 years old. And he plays for Al Tay in Saudi Arabia, and he was with Standard Liège in Belgium before that, also played for Dynamo Bucharest too. But his first tournament was in 2017, so it took him a long time to kind of catch the eye of the manager to put him on the team. And in 2017, he didn't appear in Game 1, but he gained a starting position in that cup. And in the 2017 Confederations Cup, he was the starter. 2019, fundamentally the starter, although he didn't appear in game one. He resumed the position from game two and the starter in 2021. So he looks quite established in the position there. Next candidate is Olivier Mbezo. We also had him as a likely candidate for 2019, but we thought he would be a bench player, and indeed he was. So he started only the B team game 7 there. Otherwise, he subbed into 2 games quite late. So, and actually, he wasn't on the bench for 4 of their games. So, the way that worked is I think they had 28 players on the squad, but were allowed to bring 23 players to the bench. So a few players who were on the roster didn't actually sit on the bench during the tournament. He's played none of their 3 games since the African Cup, but he was on the bench for all 3 matches, which makes him the most likely candidate for backup for the right back position. So I didn't give the bio information on him. He's been on the team since 2016, but only has 11 caps and no goals, and he's 25 years old. And he also plays in America. He plays for Philadelphia Union in the USA since 2018. And like the other player we talked about, kind of moved directly from teams in Cameroon over to the USA there. All right, well, Sacha Boey is the next. We consider him possible but unlikely. He actually hasn't earned a cap for the national team. And he actually hadn't even sat on the bench or been called up until he was named to the preliminary squad for the 2021 African Cup. But I have him here largely because of his club affiliation. He plays for Galatasaray in Turkey, which is a fairly big club, and he's young, so we could see him over the next few years. He's 22 years old, so keep an eye out for him. And the last one is Joyxim Dawa. We had him as a likely candidate, so we're a bit surprised that he wasn't selected. He had played 7 of their 10 games in the lead up to the African Cup. That's what made us consider him likely. And he was selected for the preliminary squad, but he didn't make the final cut. So he plays his soccer in Romania, has 9 caps since 2018, and is 26 years old. And he was a starter in the African Cup in 2019. However, as we saw with Collins Fay, he started game 1 and was relegated to the bench, and Collins Fay took over. So just got the 1 game there in 2019. And now he seems to be off the squad. He hasn't appeared since September 2021. So there we have it. The right defenders, we consider Collins Fay the starter and Olivier Mbezo the substitute. And if they're bringing 3 left backs, they probably won't bring 3 right backs too. So I think it'll be a bit tough for Sacha Boey or Joyxim Dawa, although there is an outside chance. Okay, let's move on to midfielders. And we have a category kind of for general or versatile midfielders. And we do have someone in that category. So that's Andre Frank Zambo Anguissa. So Zambo Anguissa is more of a defensive midfielder, but I call him a versatile midfielder because he kind of is all over the field. And he's a definite candidate. Regardless of where he plays. He has started 1 of their 3 games since the 2021 African Cup, but he was injured for the first 2 matches, so probably would have been called up had he not been injured. And I say that because he was a starter in the 2021 African Cup, starting all 7 games, except the B team game 7. So Zambo Anguissa is 27 years old, and he has been with the team since 2017 and has 42 caps and 5 goals. Notice again, very few of these players go before 2017. He plays for Napoli in Italy. Recently actually moved there in 2022, having played with Fulham in England from 2018 to 22, although he was loaned out to Napoli last year and to Villarreal in Spain before that, and he played for Marseille in France too. So pretty big clubs, pretty big club affiliations there. His first African Cup should have been in 2017, but he also refused the call up there. And he did play in the Confederations Cup that year as a starter. And he also started in the 2019 African Cup. So I'll just take a quick look at the position he's been playing in. So they have done a 4-1-4-1, but he's not the defensive midfielder when they've done that. So he's been playing really just central midfield, or sometimes a kind of a bit of an attacking midfield role. Again, that's why I call him a versatile midfielder. But generally, he's been playing as a kind of a left central midfielder for the most part. Okay, moving on. So he's a definite. He's the only actual player we have in that versatile midfielder position, and we'll move on to sorry, I'm just doing the graphics for the YouTube people here, cleaning them up a bit, and we'll move on to defensive midfielders next, and they have two likely candidates and 2 possible but unlikely candidates. So the likely candidates are Martin Hongla and Gail Ondua. And the possible but unlikely candidates are Giando Fuchs and Ivan Neu. So let's take a look at these players. And I'll begin by saying that we had predicted Martin Hongla as a definite for 2021 African Cup, and Ivan Neu as a possible candidate. So both of those have kind of dropped down a notch. And Giandro Fuchs we considered off the squad in for the 2021, but he's actually bumped up a notch to possible but unlikely. Let's take a look at Martin Hongla. He started 2 of the games since the recent African Cup and was on the bench for 1 other. But the reason he dropped down a notch was because he was not a starter in the 2021 African Cup. He started games 2, 4, 5, and 6 though. So he started 4 games, but not a starter. So he's a fairly young guy. He's 24 years old, and he's been with the team since 2020 and has 17 caps in that time. So they do use him a lot, quite a bit as a substitute, if not a starter. And the African Cup 2021 was his first cup. Gail Ondua is very new to the team. He's been on the team since 2022 and has 3 caps. And his first appearance was after the recent African Cup in March 2022. And he started 1 of their 3 games there and was on the bench for the other. He was subbed in for the other 2. So seems to have kind of gotten onto the team very quickly, even though he's not young. He's 27 years old, so a bit late to join the national setup, but inserting himself into the squad quite deeply, it seems. He plays for Hanover in Germany and with Servette in Switzerland before that, and Angie Makachkala in Russia. I just know them as Anzi, so I should have stuck with that so I didn't hurt my throat. He's also been in the Ukraine and Denmark and CSK Moscow. So he's been around, but with the national team only recently. So we have him as likely. Giandro Fuchs, we had him seemingly off the squad, but he did appear on the bench for one of their 3 recent games. Before that, he hadn't played since March 2021, which is why we thought he was off the squad, but suddenly kind of briefly popped his head above water there, although he was on the bench. So he plays for Peterborough United in England, and but hasn't been a part of any squad yet. So really an outside chance there. The other one is Ivan Neu, and he didn't play any of their games. He didn't play any of their games after the recent cup, but in fairness, he was injured for 2 of them. But he was a part of the African Cup, the recent African Cup squad. So he was selected to the squad and he made 2 appearances as a sub. But another one of those players who wasn't even on the bench for 4 games. So he's been with the team since 2021 and has 5 caps and is 25 years old, Ivan Neu, but we consider him possible but unlikely. So just in review, we have Martin Hongla and Ondua Gale, but I don't know if either of those guys are really starters, so I'm going to put them. They play, as I said, in a 4-3-3 formation, which doesn't lend itself as well as a 4-1-2-3 or a 4-2-3-1 formation to defensive midfielders. But of course, they could play a central midfield role. But I'm going to put them as substitutes here. Okay, in the central midfielder, we do have one player, one veteran player on his way out in George Manjak. So we'll cover him first. And we have Samuel Umguet as a definite, and Pierre Koundé as a likely, and James Liaseliki as a possible, and Jean Onana. I'm just going to pause for a second here and have a drink of water. All right, sorry about that. Jean Onana as a possible. We have Olivia Ncham as a possible but unlikely. And we have Jan Ataki as a player who seems to be off the squad, but has been in and around enough that he has a slight chance. So let's go back to George Manjak, who played for the team from 2009 to 2019 and had 52 caps for Cameroon. He's now 34 years old, so is basically retired from the national team, even though he still plays club soccer. And he was first with the team at the African Cup 2010, but didn't get a starting position all the way until the 2017 African Cup. But he was a starter in 2017 and 2019. So he was always in and around. Never really fully established himself as a starter, except perhaps until the end there. But even in the Confederations Cup in 2017, he was a substitute. So nevertheless, he's one of their more veteran players, one of the few veteran players that played through before 2017 and after 2017. But he's off the squad now, retired in 2019. So we're left with Samuel Umguet. Now, they don't necessarily have to use all of their central midfielders. So sometimes these players will shift around their position a little bit. For example, Umguet is listed as a central midfielder, and you would think it would be a defensive midfielder like Hongla or Ondua, who would be the back midfielder in a 4-1-4-1. So the one player ahead of the defense should be a defensive midfielder. It's confusing because, as it turns out, defensive midfielder Martin Hongla sometimes plays as an attacking midfielder. And when they do the 4-1-4-1, it is central midfielder Umguet who plays that stopper role. But nevertheless, he's coded as a central midfielder, and he has started all three of their games since the recent African Cup, and he was a starter in the African Cup itself, although he didn't start all of the games. He started 5 of the 7 games. One of those was the B team game. Nevertheless, he has been with Cameroon since 2016 and has 32 caps and is 25 years old. And he plays for KV Mechelen in Belgium and was in Austria before that. The next player who we have as likely is Pierre Koundé. Pierre Koundé actually hasn't started any of their recent 3 games, but he did sub in for 1 and he was on the bench for the 2 others. And similarly, in the 2021 African Cup, he was a starter basically in the games where Umguet wasn't a starter. No, I'm wrong about that. He was a starter in 3 games anyway. Games 1, 3, and 7. Actually, Umguet started all 3 of those games too, so I was dead wrong. Pierre Koundé has been with Cameroon since 2018, and he has 29 caps and 1 goal and is 27 years old. And he plays for Olympiacos in Greece and was with Mainz in Germany before that, and Atletico Madrid B team in Spain prior to that. I'm wondering if he was born in Spain, because even his youth clubs were in Spain, but it doesn't say that. Usually I note if they were born in a different country, so I'm guessing he was born in Cameroon. Anyway, he was his first tournament was in 2019 African Cup, where he subbed into game 2, 82 minutes in, and then gained a starting position for the remaining 2 games. And as we saw, he sometimes started in African Cup, in the recent African Cup. So we have him as a likely candidate, very likely to be selected, but a bit doubtful as a starter. So we'll probably put him as a substitute. James Leosalika actually last appeared in the 2021 African Cup, where he was just a sub. So we have him as a possible. I'm just wondering what we said about him last time. Yeah, we had him as likely last time, but he didn't play as much as we thought he would, and is a sub. He's been with the team since 2021 and has 11 caps in that time and is 26 years old. So in the lead up to the last African Cup, he played 7 after his first cap in June 2021, he played 7 of their 8 remaining games and was on the bench for the other one. That's why we thought he was a likely candidate. And he did make the team, but didn't play as big a role as we thought he would. So he plays for Estoril in Portugal right now, and was with Reims in France before that, and another player that was loaned to Middlesbrough in England. Actually, he was with the Paris Saint-Germain youth club for 10 years of his youth, but he didn't end up playing for the senior team there. The next one who we consider possible is Jean Onana. So he started actually the first of their 3 games since the recent African Cup and was subbed in for 1, and but not selected for the last one. So actually, we'll maybe move him ahead of Leosalika James there, because he seems slightly more likely. He also started a game. He was selected for the recent African Cup and started game 7, which, as we've said, is a B team game. although he wasn't subbed in like Leo Silka was. So actually, they seem about even in terms of possibility. Gino Nana has been with the team since 2020 and has 9 caps and is quite young at 22 years old, and he plays for Bordeaux in France. All right, the other 2 candidates, Olivier Ncham. He has 4 consonants at the beginning of his name, so I don't believe I can be blamed for mispronouncing it. It's Ntcham. Ncham has no caps for the national team, but he did appear recently on the bench in June 2022 for their last game there. So just kind of making it in. Just making it on our radar, basically. He was born in France and currently plays for Swansea in the English league system, and was also with Manchester United in England, although I think he only played 2 games for them. I can't remember. From 2015 to 2017. No, he played no games in his 2 years with Man City. I'm thinking of another player. And he currently has no caps for the national team, and he's not as young as one would expect. He's 26 years old, but again, when a player makes an appearance shortly before the cup, you have to consider them some kind of a possibility. So possible but unlikely there. Jan Iteke, he is 25 years old, and he's been with the team since 2020 and has earned 2 caps. But the last one was in March 2021. So he's kind of, again, a very outside possibility, but his name may pop up for all we know. He plays for Casapia in Portugal. Okay, let's go over the central midfielders. So we consider Samuel Nguet, and sometimes he's called just Samuel Guet, as a likely candidate and as a starter. Pierre Koundé, we consider him, a definite candidate is Nguet. Likely candidate, Pierre Koundé. And we would probably have him as a sub. And I guess it's pretty likely that they'll choose another central midfielder, either James Leah Silika or Jean Onana. But if they do go, they would just be probably be substitutes. And then Olivier Ncham and Jan Iteke as outside possibilities there. And we move on to left midfielders. Now, we said that they had a lot of central midfielders, but not a lot of outside midfielders. And in the left midfielder category, we only have 1 player who is possible but unlikely. And that is Arnaud Souchwin Dioum. Arnaud Souchwin Dioum. I have seen him called just Arnaud Dioum. And he was with the team since 2017 African Cup, where he gained a starting position after for game 4 onwards, and then was a starter in the 2017 Confederation Cup and the 2019 African Cup. But by the time the 2021 Cup rolled around, he had only played 2 of their 10 games in 2021. However, he did pop up on the bench after the recent African Cup for 1 of their 3 games. So kind of popped his head back up again, which is why we had to kind of include him as an outside possibility here. So yeah, maybe we'll leave the details till later, but we'll leave the details till we see if he made the team. So possible but unlikely is Arnaud Souchwin Dioum. Right midfielders, we have none. Left wingers, we only have 2 players who seem to be off the team. So I'll deal with them quickly here. The first one is Martin Acko. I'm just going to check and see whether we mentioned him in 2021. Yeah, we did. He was also possible but unlikely there and has dropped down to seemingly off the squad. Last appeared for the national team in June 2021. And the other one is George Kevin Nkudu. George Kevin Nkudu. And there's a bit of disagreement on my sources here. One of my sources has him playing one game recently, and the other source says he didn't. So he doesn't have any caps for the team. So we'll just leave him hanging out there as a name to possibly come back to if he finds his way onto the team. So there we go. Right wingers, though, a player has kind of popped up as a likely candidate. And I think we mentioned him in last time we did the podcast too. No, we didn't. He just popped up since then. So his name is Kevin Sony, and we're also going to mention Serge Tabakou as a player who seems to be off the squad. So Kevin Sony, yes, that's why he didn't pop up last time, because his first cap was in March 2022 after the recent African Cup, and he played in one game and was on the bench for the other two games. So actually seems to be working his way in there, appearing in all three games. He's been on the team since 2022, of course, and is 24 years old with just that one cap. And he plays for Asteras Tripolis in Greece there. So new to the squad. Actually, he did make our radar in 2021 because he had been named to the preliminary squad despite never having appeared on the bench before. So he was on Cameroon's radar for 2021. Now they seem to be using him. Serge Tabakou last played for the national team in June 2021, so is a very outside candidate to make the squad. We'll talk more about him in the update if he plays a little bit more, or if he returns to the squad. Okay, now let's go on to the attack, and we begin with the attacking midfielders. And among attacking midfielders, I'll first make the point that the 4-3-3 formation will usually have the attacking midfielders playing in the outside, I guess, outside forwards, left forward and right forward here. So Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, we consider a definite candidate. And Christian Basagog, hero of 2017, is been relegated to a possible candidate at this point. And Clinton and Jay, also a possible candidate. And Jack Zua seems to be off the squad. So let's go back to the top and talk about Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting. So again, an attacking midfielder, but the only time he's been on the field is when they have a two-forward formation, and he makes up the other forward in that formation, usually alongside Vincent Aboubakar, who we'll get to soon. Okay, so, but I'll get the lowdown on Choupo-Moting here. He started all three of their games since the 2021 African Cup, completely contradicting what I just said. So I'm just going to review what his position was. Oh, yes, they've been playing a 4-2-2, so I didn't contradict myself. Phew! Okay, he's also scored 3 of their 14 goals in qualifying, including one of the goals in their final playoff game against Algeria. But in the 2021 African Cup, he actually was just a sub, or he started as a subbed into games 1 and 3, and starting games 2 and 4. As I said, when they used a 4-4-2 formation, that's when he was a starter. So only started in 2 games there. Nevertheless, we have him as a definite candidate. He's captain of the team, or I think he was captain of the team in 2019, but isn't captain anymore. One of the few players who is a veteran from before 2017. He first played for the team in 2010 and has 68 caps and 18 goals. And he's 33 years old now. But he has the biggest club affiliation of all the players on the team, as he moved to Bayern Munich in Germany in 2020 and was with Paris Saint-Germain in France before that. Oddly, he was with Stoke in England prior to that, so that's a really big jump up from Stoke to Paris Saint-Germain. Usually not where Paris Saint-Germain scouts their players, I'm sure. Anyway, he was born in Germany, and prior to Stoke in Germany, was playing for German clubs like Schalke and Hamburg and Mainz. And his first cup was in 2010 World Cup, where he was a starter, and also in the 2014 World Cup and 2015 African Cup. But he was another player who refused the call-up in 2017. So it seems like 2017 was really a big year for Cameroon in terms of changing the squad and players refusing call-ups and stuff. I'll have to investigate what was going on there. He also missed the 2017 Confederations Cup, which makes it a bit odd that after missing those two cups, he came back as captain in 2019. But as we saw, he was a starter there and really just a sub in the 2021 African Cup. So Choupo-Moting definitely will be on the squad, but I'm not going to say he's going to be a starter, because he seems to be playing. He seems to be a sub too much to really say that. Although they have been using the 4-4-2 formation since, and he has been starting. Anyway, let's move on to Christian Bassogog. He scored 2 of their 4 goals in qualifying, but he has played none of their 3 games since the recent African Cup, and wasn't even selected for any of them. And that's kind of sad, actually. He's been kind of working his way off the team since his start in 2017 African Cup, where he was spectacular. I'll get to that in a second. He first played for Cameroon in 2016 and has 42 caps and 7 goals, and now is 27 years old. And he plays his club soccer in China, actually, with a couple of teams in China, Shanghai Shenhua and Henin Jianyi, since 2017. So I believe he was in China when called up for the African Cup in 2017. And that's where he's remembered from, because he was spectacular in that cup. Excellent tournament, named to the team of the tournament, and in fact voted player of the tournament. So it looked like they had found a real star in China. And he also started in the 2019 African Cup, but he was not nearly as good there, didn't score any goals, and actually missed a glorious opportunity in game 1 against Guinea-Bissau. So yeah, not so good there. And in the 2021 African Cup, he was just a bench player, so he only started 7 games. Now, since that African Cup, it almost looks like he's working his way off the team completely. So a bit of a sad decline there for Christian Bassogog, who we consider just likely here. Also likely, Clinton N'Jay. He also has not played any of the 3 games, not appeared in any of the 3 games since the African Cup. And in last January's African Cup was just a sub, although he did sub into 6 of the 7 games. Ironically, the only game he didn't appear in was that B team game. And he missed the last of 7 penalties in their shootout with Egypt there, so not a great cup for him. Clinton Njay has been with the team since 2014, so one of the few players who kind of survived whatever that transition was in 2017. He has 42 caps and 10 goals and is 29 years old, and he plays for Sivasspor in Turkey since 2022. He was with Dynamo Moscow in Russia 2019 to 22, maybe left because of the political events there. I'm not sure, but was with Marseille in France, Tottenham in England before that, and the Lyon Youth Club in France. So his first tournament was in 2015, where he was a sub, and he was a starter in the title-winning 2017 African Cup. But he did start games 1 and 2 and lose his starting position there, and wasn't selected for the Confederations Cup later that year, and has basically been on the bench since then. He was at the 2019 African Cup, starting 2 games, and just a sub in 2021, as we said. So just a possible candidate there again, like Basagog, seems to be drifting off the team as his career goes. Okay, finally we have Jacques Zua. Jacques Zua last appeared for the team in February 2021. So he was a sub in the 2019 African Cup. But we won't talk that much about him because he seems to be off the team now. The most odd statistic about him is, even though he's listed as an attacking midfielder or even as a forward by some sources, he has no goals over his 30 caps for the national team. So possibly part of the reason he is no longer on the squad. Okay, so in review, I'm going to say Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting is definite for being called to the squad, I would say, but I put him down as a substitute here because he's not a regular starter. And then at the possible level, we have Christian Basagog and Clinton Njay. We have a category for secondary strikers, but there are none. So we move on to forwards, where they have quite a few players, beginning with Vincent Abubakar, who we consider a definite candidate, and Mumi Ngamalu, sometimes called Nicholas Ngamalu, I think actually more often called Nicholas, also as a definite, and Carl Toko Ikambe, who we should probably put ahead of Nicholas Ngamalu there, because he's also a definite, but even more definite. At the likely level, we have Ignatius Ganago, and at the possible level, we have Stefan Bahokan, and actually a few candidates here at the possible: Leandra Kawamba, Duplex Chichamba, and that's it. And seemingly off the squad, we have John Mary Honey, who is sometimes just known as John Mary. And we have Dangmo Maniker, seems to be off the squad, and Blondin Meaka. We'll tell you why they've been added here, even though they seem to be off the squad. Okay, so we were a bit confused by this in 2000, in the lead up to the Cup, because basically we had 3 definite candidates there and 2 likely candidates, and we were wondering how they could fit all these players onto the field, because most of them seem to be getting a lot of game time. And the way it kind of works out is this. Well, we'll describe it in terms of their 4-4-2 formation. And if you looked at the formations, you saw they always have a 4-man midfield, which is a bit ironic, considering that most of their players are coded in central positions. But the way it works is that 2 of these forwards basically play as wingers in the 4-4-2 formation, so the outside midfielders. Or if they move to a 4-3-3, those players kind of move up to the outside forward position. But usually at centre forward is Vincent Abubakar, and he has been well. He scored 2 of their 14 goals in qualifying, and he started 2 of their 3 games since the recent African Cup. I was very surprised, in fact, that he was only a sub in the second game against Algeria. I guess they were going into a more defensive mode, but only a sub, and he came in at 111 of that game, which really surprised me. But they did actually score late to win. I don't think he was the scorer, though. Just let me check. I think it was Toko Ekamba that was the scorer. Toko Ekamba, Choupo-Moting got a goal in regular time. 2021 African Cup. Vincent Abubakar was the captain, and he started all 7 games except the last one, the B team game, and scored 8 of their 14 goals. So really a scorer for the national team, as we'll see. So Vincent Abubakar has been with the team since 2010. So again, one of the few players kind of surviving over that transition. And he has 87 caps and 33 goals, which is a really good percentage. I'll give you the percentage a bit later. And he is 30 years old now. He plays for Al Nasser in Saudi Arabia and has done so since 2021. And before that was with Besiktas in Turkey and Porto in Portugal. Prior to that, he was in France and then in Cameroon in his youngest days. So his first tournament for the Cameroon national team was 2010, where he was just a sub. And but there were very high hopes for him going into the 2014 World Cup. But for some reason, he didn't play in game 1 and didn't end up showing much in that cup. He started games 2 and 3, but didn't score any goals. But by 2015 African Cup, he was a starter. He should have been in 2017, but a back injury prevented him from playing as a starter, especially at the beginning of the tournament. But he did score their crucial late winning goal late in the final for their 2-1 win over Egypt there. And he also played in the Confederations Cup that year, but a knee injury prevented his participation in 2019. When he came back in 2021, he was the captain of the team and performed really well, won the Golden Boot Award and named to the team of the tournament. So a big hope for them, Vincent Abubakar. Now the next 2 players, Mumu Ngamalu and Carl Toko Ekamba. These are the players who are designated. They're coded as forwards, but they don't always play as forwards, as we saw. They play as kind of wingers or mid or outside forwards. So Mumi Ngamalu scored 1 of their 14 goals in qualifying. That was on a penalty against the Ivory Coast, and he started the last of their 3 games since the recent African Cup, but that was because he was injured for the 2 games against Algeria, so a bit of a loss for them there. In the African Cup 2021, he started all 7 games except the B team game, game 7. And he's been with the team since 2015 and has 40 caps, but only 4 goals, actually, even though he's coded as a forward, and he is 28 years old. His first tournament, despite starting in 2015, was not the 2017 African Cup, but the 2017 Confederations Cup, where he was a sub. He didn't make the team for 2019, so he's fairly new as a starter, which we saw he was in the 2021 African Cup. So I wonder if I should move him down to likely, but I definitely think he's going to be there. The other one is more likely, Carl Toko Ikamba. So he has started all three of their games since the African Cup, and he scored 3 of their 14 goals in qualifying. And I mentioned that crucial late winning goal in extra time against Algeria to snatch the advancing spot and reach this cup. And he was a starter in the 2021 African Cup, was pretty impressive there. Actually scored 5 of their 14 goals. So between him and Vincent Abubakar, they got 13 of the 14 goals. He showed, great talent there, tremendous bursts of speed. Carl Toko Akambo. So he's been with the He's been with the team since 2015 and has 50 caps and 12 goals, and he's 30 years old now. He plays for Lyon in France and was with Villarreal in Spain before that, and was born in France, so played for smaller clubs in France prior to joining Villarreal. Even though his first cap was in 2015, his first tournament was in 2017 African Cup, where he was just a substitute. And he was also a substitute in the Confederations Cup later that year. But in 2019, he was a starter. And also in 2021, as we said. So we have him as a definite candidate. I'll leave Ngamalu as a definite candidate, but I'm a little less convinced by him. Let's move on to our likely candidate, Ignatius Ganago. So he started none of their 3 recent games since the African Cup, but he was subbed into 2 of them and on the bench for the other. And he was also selected for the 2021 African Cup, although he started only game 7 and subbed into one other game. So we have him as likely as being on the squad for the World Cup, although very unlikely a starter. So he's been with the team since 2019 and has 11 caps, one of the younger players at 23 years old. And he currently plays for Lens in France, and since 2020, Lens. Our next candidate is Stefan Bahoken, and he played none of their recent games since the recent African Cup and was not selected for any of them. However, we think he remains a possibility because he was selected for the 2021 African Cup. But he was only a substitute there, started just that B team game, game 7, and otherwise subbed into 2 games there. So Stefan Bahoken has been with Cameroon since 2018 and has 22 caps and 4 goals and is 30 years old. So a little late in joining Cameroon. He was 26 when he got his first cap. He plays for Kasımpaşa in Turkey. That was a recent move. He was with Angers in France for 4 years before that, and he was born in France and played for French clubs throughout his career. His career, which began at 6 years old when he joined a youth club in 1998. Actually, that is not as uncommon as a lot of people would think. His father actually played for Cameroon in the 1982 World Cup. In terms of tournaments, though, 2019 was his first one, and he subbed into games 1 and 2 and then gained a starting position after that. But he didn't keep that starting position, as in 2021 he was just a substitute, as we saw. So we have him as a likely candidate. Leandro Tawamba is newer to the team. He started one of the 3 recent games and subbed in for 2 others. So he seems to be making quick inroads there. Well, not as quick as all that. He's been on the team since 2018 and has 7 caps. And, he's 33 years old. I thought he was a young guy, but I wonder if I'm right about that. I wonder if he's He's 23 years old. I don't have time to, I do have time to check. Tawamba. Yikes, I don't want to take too much time checking. No, really, he's 32 years old. And will be 33 this year. So, wow. And yeah, looking at his club history, that makes sense. So he's currently with Al Tawoun in Saudi Arabia and has really played all over the place in Serbia, Kazakhstan, Slovakia, Libya. He's one of these traveling players. South Africa, that was the first country he traveled to. However, he's never made it to a tournament. Despite being with the team since 2018, was overlooked for the 2019 and 21 African Cups, so has just made inroads in the last 3 games, really. But we have to consider him likely because he was involved in all 3 of them. Next is Duplex Tchamba, who we also consider possible. And he has been with the team since 2021 and has just 2 caps. He really is young, but not as young as all that, 24 years old. And he didn't start any of the games in 2021, but he was on the bench. Sorry, didn't start any of the games, the recent games since the last World Cup, but he was on the bench for 2 of those. And has otherwise somewhere along the way earned 2 caps. And he was, I believe, a consideration for the 2017. I have a note on him for the 2017 Confederations Cup, so I wonder if he had played a game for them. No, I see he was on the bench for a friendly in around that time, but he wasn't selected for either that or for any of the African Cups since. So Duplex Tchamba, just a possibility there. John Mary Honey. He plays in Japan, but he last appeared for the national team in September 2021, so we won't spend a lot of time on him. Dangmo Maniker last appeared in March 2021, and Blondin Mayapia also last appeared in March 2021. So, their name has come up in the last couple of years, but they don't seem to be making it onto the squad. So we'll just review the many forwards they have to choose from, and we consider Vincent Abubakar and Carl Toko Ikambi and Mumu Ngamalu as definites for the World Cup, but I'm going to put Mumu Ngamali as a substitute. He'll probably be a starter, but I'm just not sure enough to put him as a starter. And also probably Ignacio Ganago, who we have as a likely candidate, will make the cup because they usually bring around 5 forwards. So there's also a chance for Stefan Bahogan, Leandra Tawamba, and Duplex Tchamba to actually make the squad. But if they do, they would be substitutes. Okay, now we're going to spend a little bit of time discussing the squad as a whole. So we'll kind of refer back to some of the things we said last time in our takeaways from the previous podcast. So here again, we got a notice that there's very few players who played before 2017, and even a lot of the players on the 2017 title-winning squad have moved on. And so I'd say more than half of the players that we consider top candidates for reaching this cup started from 2019 onwards. So they're really doing a lot of rebuilding. We even saw in the last 3 games that they're bringing new players in and trying them out. So not the kind of the solid squad who've been playing together for a long time like Senegal, but rather a bit of a rebuilding squad. And I gotta say, what they have built doesn't seem particularly strong. They failed to reach the World Cup in 2018, and it was a round of 16 finish in the 29 African Cup. Third place in 2021 was better as host, and qualifying for this cup was good over Algeria in those final playoff games. So perhaps it's building in a good way, but I got to say it doesn't seem as strong as, say, a Senegal team. So I'm gonna be bold and just say that you never know when the cup comes around. They could turn out to be better than they were in the build up to the cup. But not the strongest squad. And finally, we noticed that there are a lot of players coded in central positions. And so it's ironic, actually, that Cameroon goes with 4 midfielders almost all the time, which is a formation that uses the wings more. So that means players coded as central players are playing out on the wings. But this turns out to be mostly the forwards coming back to play as wingers, or if they move to a different formation, sometimes as outside forwards. Because Cameroon is fundamentally an attacking team. So forwards playing as wingers. Okay, let's take a look at some of the other information. So, in terms of club affiliation, I would say not nearly the club affiliations that Senegal and Morocco have for this World Cup, but they are with a few decent teams. We've seen Bayern Munich mentioned, and then a lot of respectable European teams like Inter Milan, Olympiacos, Lyon, Napoli, Bordeaux, stuff like that. But I'd say half the players or more play for kind of more middle-level European teams like Middlesbrough, Hanover, Ghent, and Young Boys, to name a few. And they also have a few players playing outside of Europe, none of them actually playing Cameroon. We did see the one player playing in Africa for Congo DR's top team, Vita. But we have 4 players playing in Saudi Arabia and 2 players playing in the US, although they are with top teams in the US, Seattle Sounders and Philadelphia. And then we saw Basagog plays in China. Okay, so I would say club affiliations not as good as some of the other African teams who made the cup, but certainly not bad. Age and experience. Well, I'm currently putting together a document, kind of as I go through the teams. I'm building the document, so I'm getting an average. And what I'm doing for that is basically taking the players who are definite, likely, and possible, and kind of compiling them into an Excel sheet and working out a little bit of data from that. So we have the average age of Cameroon as 26.8, and I've only done the African teams so far, but the average seems to be in the average range. The average seems to be around 26 or 27, so they're kind of bang on average there. And I'm not even sure how significant this information is. Average caps is 24.2, and that is actually lower than average. And that kind of makes sense with whatever transition they went through in 2017. Few of the veterans survived it. So most of the players have earned their caps from 2017 onwards, and a good number of them from 2019 onwards. So no surprise that it's a little bit below average there. And I also did, just for fun, total goals. So among them, Cameroon has 89 goals. I said they were a scoring team, and it turns out to be that way, because among the players who are being considered for the squad, they have 89 goals, and the average is really in the low 80s, so a bit higher than average there. Again, for what it's worth. And I'll talk about the percentage of goals for the scorers pretty soon here. Okay, so as far as players to watch, there's really no outstanding player in defence, but they do have a couple of some of their more steady players are Onana in goal, and Ngadue in central defence, and Collins Fay in right defence, although he's actually not that fairly new to the position. But and then a couple of players who seem to have established themselves there, Castelletto and Tolo, but they do seem to be kind of sticking with those players quite a bit. And Umguet too plays as a stopper when it's a 4-1-4-1. So a solid defence there that seems to be playing together most of the time. Although they're not a fortress, maybe they will become more of a fortress as they play together more, rather than being a defensive team. They are more of an attacking team, as we saw with the goals they have. So I'm going to say they're a scoring team. And just to give you an overview of their percentages here, Vincent Aboubakar has really impressive stats. Sorry, I'm just finding it here. Vincent Aboubakar, 33 goals in 87 games. That is a percentage of 37.9%, 38%. Few forwards in the world can boast a percentage like that for their national team. So that's pretty impressive. The next highest, to my surprise, is Choupo-Moting, who has 18 goals in 68 games. That's 27%, which I don't view him as much of a scorer as Karl Toko Ekambi, but Ekambi has 22%, which is still pretty good. And then they, besides that, have two other players above 15% in Basagog and Bahokan, and two players above 10% in Ngamalu, and surprisingly in Zambo Anguissa, who in my mind is more of a defensive player, but he has, he has 5 goals in 42 games, so slightly above 10%. That's pretty good for a central player. So look out, especially I would say Vincent Aboubakar and Karl Toko Ekambi. Look out for them as scorers. But it seems like when Choupo-Moting gets on the field, he does pretty well. We'll just look at a couple of their new names. So Rigobert Song is their new manager. And this may be a bit of a concern in defense, because the two goalkeepers, Davis Ipasi and Simon Omasola, they're the two likely goalkeepers behind Andre Onana. And they have just 8 caps between them, so fairly inexperienced goalies. I wonder if they should. I wondered actually, even when I was going over it, if they were going to consider, bringing Fabrice Ondoa, because he's not actually that old. And he has a lot more experience, so it might be good for them to bring a bit of a more experienced goalkeeper there. And nevertheless, in terms of players who played recently, it looks like Ipasi and Omasola are the two most likely candidates to bring to the squad. Continuing on with new players. In the central defence, we have Christopher Wu. So I think they'll bring him because they're a bit short of central defenders. Defensive midfielder Gael Ndua seems to be getting game time and working his way into the squad. He's not actually young. He's 27, but he has just 3 caps. So with new players, I'm looking at young players, but also new to the team. Gene Onana, I should say. is young. He's 22 and has 9 caps, so is working his way onto the squad. He's a central midfielder. Right winger Kevin Soni seems to be making his way into the squad. He's 24 and has played all 3 of their recent games. And forward Duplex Tchamba has been trying to work his way onto the squad for quite a while, 24 years, but maybe getting his chance here. 24 years old and has earned only 2 caps, but maybe we consider him a possible candidate along with most of the other ones we've mentioned here, except for Gale and Dua, who we consider a likely candidate. Okay, in terms of injuries, we don't have anyone who's injured, and if anyone gets injured from now to the Cup, we will cover that in our update podcast. And in terms of notable absences, honestly, I would say Joel Matip is the only noticeable absence, but he's been absent for so long. I'm sure they'll try to get him once again, but he's been saying no, apparently. And then we did mention Banana Yaya and George Manjek, but that was more in terms of them having left holes, actually. Banana Yaya just popped up in 2019 and went as quickly as he came. George Manjek is a bit more of a veteran that they've lost, but they lost him before the 2021 African Cup. So we'll go over the list one more time here. So we have, for YouTube watchers, we've highlighted the starters, the players we think are starting in green, and the players we think are likely, will be more backup players in blue, but both of them we think are either definite or likely to make the team. So we start with Rigobert Song, who replaced Tony Concheco as the manager and will lead them through the Cup. The definite candidate for goalie is Andre Onana, and in central defense we have Michael Ngaju and Jean-Charles Castanello, who seems to have nailed down the spot of central defender there. Left back, Nuhu Tolo and Ambrose Oyongo providing a bit of a challenge for that spot, but it seems to be Tolo's for now. And there's less of a challenge to Faye Collins as the starting right back. So the 4 defenders there. In the midfield, the general or versatile midfielder, Andre Zambo Anguissa, is a definite. And among defensive midfielders, there's no definite starter. Actually, Samuel Umguet, who's coded as a central midfielder, is more defensive and more definite. But Martin Hongla and Gale Ndua are likely to make the team, but as substitutes. I'm supposed to be doing just starters here. So central midfielder Samuel Umguet is definite. And among left midfielders and right midfielders and left wingers and right wingers, there are none who are even in the picture, to be honest, or who are likely to make the squad. We have a few names in the picture that we went over in the podcast, but none of them seem to have a good chance of making it. Attacking midfielder, we don't have any definite starters, but Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting is close, but because we're not sure, we have listed him as more of a backup player, but he will probably start some games. However, forwards Vincent Abubakar and Carl Toko Ikambi are they're almost certain to start, and probably Nicholas or Mumi Ngamalu, probably a starter there too. And then a lot of other candidates as forwards, and a couple of them will probably be chosen for the Cup, but we'll have to wait to see. All right, well, that brings us to the end of this podcast. Keep in mind that we'll be doing an update as soon as new information comes out. No, it won't be as soon as new information comes out. It'll probably be in November when we know who the final squad will be. And as I say, that'll probably be in November after the teams have published their player lists. Meanwhile, keep an eye on us at Soccerphiles Canada. Not only are we going to do podcasts for teams, but we're also going to do a shorter version because we know not everyone will want this long version. So just keep an eye on the website and you'll find whatever versions that we do, and you can listen to the ones that seem interesting. So that's Soccerphiles Canada. That's Soccerphiles with a PH in the middle and an S at the end. And you can visit our website at soccerphiles.captivate.fm, and all this information and more will be in the show notes. So thanks very much for listening, and we hope you will listen to future podcasts. Bye-bye.